Welcome, everybody, to Legacy Acquisitions and Hammerhead Capital Project Investment Overview, the Charleston, which is the 158-unit build-to-rent opportunity in Foley, Alabama. I'm going to start with a little commentary. I'm very excited to be working on this particular project and all the projects that we're up to with Legacy Acquisitions. When I first met Andy, he was telling me that we could potentially partner on some value-add multifamilies, and I'm like, sweet. And then he told me about build-to-rent. I'm like, build-to-rent? I don't know about that stuff. I've never developed before, but as I've looked at it, I've seen how much the general partnership team can make. I've seen how much the limited partners can make, and it's made it so that I have decided that I want to make Legacy Acquisitions the go-to experts in the build-to-rent space, and you will soon find out why as we go into this presentation. So with that, I'm really excited to get into this and dive deep into the project. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, the man, the myth, the legend, Andy McMullen. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellent, man. It's always impossible to kind of match your energy, but at least we just kind of breeze through this offering.
Real quick, I will say that all of the projects that we do are 506c offerings, so feel free to pause the presentation at this point and read through, or you can also get a copy of this slide deck on our website, including the disclaimer at legacyacquisitions.com. So right back at you, my friend.
Yeah, so let's just take you guys through a quick roadmap, what we're going to be talking about today, talk a little bit about the background, how we found the property. We'll get into a little bit about the numbers. We'll get into the timeline, which is development is the most important thing. Unit mix. Derek makes beautiful things. You'll meet Derek here in a minute. Budget, we'll get into that. Comps, and then some FAQs after the financials. So let's get right into it. Just a little bit about us. We're kind of focused now because of the economy on development projects, risk mitigated development projects. We'll deal a little bit with how we do that. But really our mission is to bless these communities, man. The residents, and mostly in the Southeast, you'll learn a little bit about some of the things that we've already done, which is, over 60, 70 years on the GP side, building out these projects. So why don't we just kind of keep it moving? So I've been in the game about 20 years. I do have a second big M. I've been doing this about on the development side, maybe 2004 or 5, kind of started off on the brokerage side and then kind of evolved into some development stuff with multifamily. And then about 3-4 years ago, we really started to look to a lot at the built to rent. We've got quite a large number of units that we manage currently and quite a few projects that we've got underway. My partner, Derek Alexandrenko, he's been doing this as well for almost a couple of decades now, 18 years. Built multiple homes, single family homes, upscale, large scale. He just basically builds beautiful things. So MBA from Louisiana, really focuses on the Southeast. I'm kind of hoping that we'll get a chance to get through some of his photos. You guys will definitely be impressed. And then Andrew G, my brother from up north, California. He's a co-founder of Mag Capital. He's been our advisor for years. His track record is incredible. I mean, they've been developing industrial, multifamily, single family, just a tremendous resource for us as we've been through this built to rent journey. I think we talked a little bit about this, not necessarily important. To some people it is. Built quite a few single families, quite a few apartment buildings that we own. We've raised quite a bit of capital. I think the big number there, though, is the constructed units and years of experience. And when you have 1,000 plus constructed units and 60 plus years of experience, you learn quite a few things. Now, we don't know it all, but I think we know how to navigate, and we've done it through, multiple cycles, I should say, as well. We started this, we've hit the 2008 cycle, even early 2000s, we were in the real estate game. Why build to rent? We're going to talk a little bit about it. Basically, there's about a shortage of 3.8 million homes. You could use a number. I've seen 5, I've seen 2.5. The reality is that we basically built about 500,000 last year, right? And that was a pretty strong year. So for over a decade, we haven't built any homes. There's very little supply. If you think about the built to rent kind of triangle, what we'd like to talk about, you've got low supply, you've got rents that are high, and then you've got this increasing affordability gap, which basically is the amount between the mortgage payment and the actual rental rate is about $850 nationwide. So all those people that could buy before interest rates grew are now renting. We have a huge contingent of young families that love built to rent because they love the big backyards, they love the open spaces, they love that there's not somebody next to them. And then we also have a contingent of the, I would say, more empty nesters, people that have lived in homes most of their life, but they don't want to do anything more than change a light bulb, right? And so for those communities, for those people, built to rent really makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is, I think if you really think about people that you know, communities that you know, there's been a suburbanization going on for a while. I mean, COVID certainly accelerated, but for a while, people have said, hey, I can work from home, I can live in different places. Doesn't it make sense for me to now think, hey, I could sign a 1 or 2 year lease with brand new stuff, amenities like I would at apartment building, but I've got my own roof over my head and I've got this open space to, with my doggy door. So I think that's part of the reason people love built to rent.
Hey,
Anything that you wanted to add about that?
in fact,
Ruben?
there is, right? So I think for people who are looking for a solid investment opportunity, they've been struggling this year with the rising interest rates and economic climate changes and calamities in the lending markets. And they have been not really slowing down in the built to rent space. As far as I have seen, every time that I post about built to rent, I get a lot of engagement. And I think the reason is because if you are tired of living in an apartment and don't want to buy a house, but you want to have that house experience, you're going to want to probably live in a brand new house versus like a 70s or 80s house, which essentially is probably the same price as these ones, except they're brand new. And of course, like you mentioned, they come with a doggy door, a driveway, and a backyard and that personal feeling. And they get to treat it more like a home and stay there for an average of 40 months instead of 18 months. Tell me, has this been your experience too, Andy? Do you see people moving into build to rent because they can't find any deals in value add that are penciling or not at the same level as before? What's been your experience?
You mean as far as
as far
investors?
as far as trends, like where are
Yeah,
people wanting to put their money these days? Is it
yeah.
still in value
Well, I
add?
mean,
Is it
if you follow kind of the sharp money, right, or the smart money, just Wall Street in general is a huge. This is the favorite son, and it makes sense, right? Because if you've got rents that are going up, then you can basically deliver the yield for CalSTRS and CalPERS and all the other pension funds that are there, and you also have potentially the opportunity to collect on appreciation, right? And so, at the very least, you've got rents that, if they even regulate down a bit, the expense ratio on these built to rent projects is so much lower than Wall Street, buying, multifamily properties, right? So they've got basically 50% expenses that paying on multifamily properties, 35% expenses after they've stabilized an asset for a built to rent project. So you got basically all that cheese kind of in between. If you get rents going up, if you get values going up, that's just extra icing.
cool? Let's go to the next slide.
Some people ask about our process. I mean, I'm not going to get too far into the weeds. We'll have a deck and people can look at it, but in general, the acquisition phase is kind of the meat and potatoes of our business, in that you got to have consistent deal flow. You got to be constantly looking at new projects and new areas. You got to consider the topography and if there's going to be a lot of land clearing and tree clearing, etc. Luckily, we've got geniuses on our team in Derek and Chris that have been doing this at an institutional level for years. Our partner, Chris Vaughn, is a landscape architect, so he can kind of do this stuff in his sleep. But when people think about development, a lot of times what they're really thinking about is, hey, how did you entitle it? How did you find the project? How did you figure out that it made sense in this market? Why is the growth happening here as opposed to here? All the kind of nuances of development kind of planted in this process. And so that's good and bad. It's bad in the sense that there's a lot of things that can go awry in that first stage, that early stage, right? You might spend a lot of money, never get project approval. Spend a lot of money, you get the mayor that decides, hey, I don't want your project there, right? So what we usually do is we'll option the land, then we'll go through the entitlement process, have the hearings with the city and the county, then purchase the property. So we've already kind of cleared out a lot of the entitlement risk by the time that we own the land. Then at that point, we will go into what we call infrastructure or horizontal development. This is where Derek comes in with his subs and we do the tie-ins, the installation, infrastructure, streets, roads, sewers, etc. That might be another 6 to 9 months depending on the area. And then at that point, we can jump to what we call vertical construction, which is the unit build. So when you see these beautiful interiors and exteriors that Derek's created, all of that's kind of happening after all of the roads have been laid. And at each stage, risk has been mitigated, right? Because it's much easier for somebody to invest in a project that's ready for vertical build than it is for somebody that hasn't started horizontal, than it is for somebody investing in a project that doesn't have entitlement. So let's go to the next one.
Yeah. And one thing that I would say is build to rent is very different in Portland than it is in Phoenix, than it is in Atlanta, than it is in Florida, than it is in Alabama, than it is in Louisiana. And, one of the things that gives us the competitive advantage in the areas where we currently invest is because this is where our development team and partners, Derek and Chris, they live there. They know the markets. They have an incredible track record. They've built a bunch of homes. They know how to find the land. They know how to deal with the city. They know how to make and provide the city with something that they want so they can move very quickly. And they've been doing this for quite some time. So I just wanted to mention that when we have these flat pieces of land in areas where our partners live, it gives us an incredible competitive advantage over a place like Phoenix, where you have a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and you have to hold land and you have to compete with institutions. So we really love these secondary and tertiary markets. With that, we'll go to the next slide.
So let's talk a little bit about Foley. So Foley is a market basically on the Gulf Shores. It kind of sits in between Mobile, Pensacola. But what's pretty amazing about this area is how we found it. I mean, we found this project after we had started another project of ours in Lafayette, Louisiana. And we started really to pay attention. If we're going to build 100 units to 300 units, where are our exit strategies? In other words, who is buying up land and where are they buying it? And if those DR Hortons of the world or DSLDs of the world are now kind of shifting at least some of their focus to build to rent projects, where are they going? Well, Derek finds an article, kind of hears the grapevine, DR Horton decides to buy a site. We go and we check that area out, because if Foley, Alabama, just if people are looking, is a smaller population. However, it sits in an area of Baldwin County, which is the fastest growing county in all of Alabama. So if you were to take kind of a Google map view, you would basically see the growth over the last 5-10 years. So Derek, I'm curious, like when you first showed up to the area, or maybe Chris had kind of started to investigate a little bit about what's happening in Foley, what was it that kind of triggered it for you? Hey, this is something we should really take seriously.
Yeah, when we got there and started looking around, and just the evidence of all the new residential subdivisions that were being put in, these are, just your traditional subdivisions, but they also did have a build to rent that went in nearby, and that gave us a really good comp. But the main driver for us is the new residential, for sale developments, because as they start increasing that basis of taxpayers in the area, the population growth is just showing that more and more is moving into that area. And it's really been, for Foley in Baldwin County to be beating out Huntsville, Alabama, which everybody's been hearing about for the last 5 years. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I think, if there's anything to we'll have our market studies here, but if you're just kind of driving around, we're going to be out there next weekend, and you'll just see a lot of the green kind of pipe. It basically means that they're just laying kind of foundation for additional building, new development, new businesses. So things are happening there, and we'll have some videos hopefully we can share with the group next week. But you can kind of see, so people that are thinking, oh, this is just a small town, it's really not, right? I mean, we've got every amenity that you really need. Now, people that would be worried potentially about flood zones, et cetera, obviously we do not develop in anything that's flood zone. I think it's, 50 feet above sea level, really kind of tucked away from really. And Derek, in your experience, what has been kind of I wouldn't say catastrophic, but what's the likely scenario of, hurricanes coming through? They are of some frequency, and certainly when they're on the news, it's obviously quite intimidating. But What would you say to those people that maybe are concerned a little bit about the weather there?
Well, Foley is similar to where I live in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's about 20, 30 miles inland from the coast. And we go through hurricanes every couple of years. One comes through. For us, I've never had to actually file an insurance claim because of a hurricane. Sometimes they blow down tree branches. The biggest hassle for us is that they knock out power. If it's a larger storm, you might be out of power for a couple hours to a couple of days. Depends on the size of the storm. The real danger are those, communities that are actually on the coast. The beach towns, those are the ones that experience the storm surge, which is the most destructive, force with the hurricanes, because they could literally, wipe everything out. So Foley, similar to Lafayette, where I live, is above sea level. It's inland. It has all that buffer so storm surge is not a consideration. It's really just, if a major hurricane does come through that area, it does happen every 10 years or so. We experience one in Louisiana where I live. Some wood fences might be blown over, a couple of shingles might be lost, but it's not even worth filing an insurance claim. So that's really the biggest impact from hurricanes, for most folks that don't live directly on the coast in a beach house.
And Ruben can talk when we get a little bit later about his experience and seeing how these things are built, because I don't want to steal his line, but he says they're like mini tanks. So yeah. So here's just a little bit about the wage growth. I think we got into that. I mean, I think the most kind of important takeaway here is just how quickly this area has been growing, how much money is going into it, how much bigger money, smart, sharp money likes it in this Baldwin County. It's been happening for a little while. Again, I would take a Google view, you can see it for yourself. But I mean, just look at this compared to some of the other counties in the area. I mean, that's a pretty large growth over the last 10 years, 25, almost 26%. All right, let's talk a little bit about the opportunity. 506C, as Ruben mentioned earlier, accredited investors only. It's 158 units with that pool, clubhouse. About 70% of built-to-rent residents in general have dogs. And that's probably been pretty close to our experience on the stuff that we own. We're going to be raising 1.5 to 2 million, and we do already have relationships with managers in the area. This is what we came for, right? See what masterpieces Derek's built in the past, and what he is building here is just beautiful construction. So talk about a little bit, maybe about the iteration, Derek, on how you decided, over time, what the floor plan was going to look like, what efficiencies you've seen in the communities that you've developed in, because Ruben's seen firsthand how beautiful these projects are built.
Well, you can see that from the front elevations, why we chose to name this one the Charleston, because that's the type of architecture that we're choosing to build. They're going to have, front set streets where we have some of these row houses or townhouses that just give us that old Charleston look. And it just, even though it's new construction, it's going to have a lot of green space, a lot of greenery along the street to really tie people in that want to have that sense of community and walking. And then we also have the cottages, which are, so we have both types of units, some 2 bedrooms, some 3 bedrooms. It just lends us to reach even more prospective renters based on what they're looking for. And we just add the small touches that, people love these days. We have, custom built barn doors. We do vaulted ceilings, the granite countertops, shaker cabinets. So over the years, just things that we found that really make tenants say, wow, and make it, they could see themselves living there. It makes these things pretty easy to rent once somebody walks in them.
Yeah, I gotta mention that for somebody that wants to live in a 2-bedroom apartment and they can choose to take this instead of that, with the vaulted ceilings, the crown molding, the extra closet space, the luxury faucets, the fireplace, the custom built doors, the drop down attic ladder that comes down. It's just incredibly well built with the baseboards and the cement flooring and the gray shaker cabinets and brand new appliances. It's just wow. You get in there and there might even be some technology in our future projects, better said. So I was absolutely impressed and stunned with the quality of not just the built to rent communities that Derek is building, but also he took me to some of the individual houses that he's built, and he can go incredibly insane with secret doors that give you access to hidden offices and amazing things that you just would never think of even implementing unless you've been building for a very long time. So I can't speak highly enough about the product. You know, even with the industrial fans and the vaulted ceilings and everything else, it looks like it's A class, even though we're doing this as affordable housing for the most part. Any other comments on that?
No, I was just gonna say that I'm looking forward to like going to his house and seeing like his Batmobile. You know, he's probably got those like it turns opens up and he's got his own Batmobile. We're gonna ride around Lafayette. Yeah, so pretty simple deal that we put together here. Land costs about 950. Horizontal, as I mentioned, streets, roads, sewer, tie-ins, all of that in the infrastructure phase. Closing costs, unit development build out is probably about 130 for the unit build out. I think we're probably, so that puts probably that maybe about 180 or so. When you're getting $1,700 in rent in Lafayette, and we're probably getting maybe on average almost 2,000. I think we've got some 2 bedrooms going for 1,650. We've got some 3 bedrooms going a little closer to 19. Got some 4 bedrooms even in that 23, 22 range. So all of those we've comped underneath the current competitive properties. You know, we'll have this in a deck and people can kind of pour over it if they want, maybe do some of their own Renometer, CoStar, apartment.com, sorry, some of those comps. But yeah, so here's our rent, 1,650, 3 bedrooms, 22, 2,300. So I just want people to think about that. If you were just kind of doing some math on that kind of income against, about $180,000 a build per unit, very efficient, right? Really high yield on cost, really high spread, which, a lot of lenders care about, and what people that are investing in multifamily should be considering a lot more now is, look, if rates are going up and cap rates are going up, then I need to really kind of figure out how am I going to pay my bills if I don't have that kind of yield and spread. So we can get in that another time, but I wanted to say that all of our projects with our underwriting are really have that first as a consideration. And then in addition to that, just all the risk mitigants. Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit about those. I think what's maybe different over the last 3 years is that almost every investment that we look into now is based on this idea, which is, what if interest rates keep going up and we can't refinance and we're paying, these higher interest rates, we're capped out at 9.5 or 9.75, whatever that number happens to be, because you figure you got your spread, which is maybe in that 5-6 range, and then you got your SOFR, which is kind of the short-term rate that used to be maybe 20 basis points, 40 basis points. Now it's 300 basis points. So if we're looking at these opportunities for our investors, what is the absolute, what are the downsides, right? I mean, there's certainly things that we cannot predict. I don't think anybody would have predicted rates this high, but we want to make sure that we've got, a large contingency, 2 times to 3 times what most people would have at their 5% contingency. We want a huge exit cap. So in other words, if current cap rates are in the 5.25, we'd want, and maybe they're even lower than that because most built to rent projects are trading in the 4s and 3s, but we'd want to have an exit cap that's much higher than that, maybe 100 basis points, maybe 20 per year. We want to make sure that we're very conservative on the rent growth. So even though we know what rents we can get now, we want to only be 3%, even though inflation's 7, 8, 9, whatever that is, we want to be really conservative on the rent growth. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if any of those happen to be better than we've projected, then that's gravy, right? We don't want to have to underwrite with, these kind of built-in upside opportunities. If any of these kind of, the contingency we don't need, or rents increase a little bit, or the cap rates don't go up dramatically, right? Then that's extra bonus IRR, an extra multiple for the investor. So we have an A class, we have a B class. The A class structure would be for anybody investing under $250,000. They would basically project out a 16%, 16.6 IRR, equity multiple somewhere in the 179. Remember, this is on 4 years, right? So that's a great equity multiple on a 4-year project. And then we have $250,000 above would get a little bit better IRR, a little bit annualized return, and they'd actually get a better split. So 70-30 straight across the board for an investor that's Class B. An investor that's Class A would have basically a 70-30 split to a 15% IRR, and then it would revert back to 50-50. So without getting too long-winded on that, people can ask for underwriting or have us walk through some of the dynamics of the financials.
Okay, so let's wrap it up here, guys. One of the reasons we really love build to rent is with our existing business model, we intend to sell to institutions. And according to Neil Bawa, the great economist, there's $500 billion worth of levered money that is ready to deploy into the purchase of subdivisions. And builders like us, we can only provide them with 2% of the total demand that there is for this particular product, the build to rent subdivision product. So if you guys want to join the trend, if you haven't found the great deals, you can start looking towards build to rent, because we are finding that we control our own destiny, our own economy. The capital that we need to take these properties is much less than it would be for an equivalent size value add multifamily, because we're creating value at every step along the way. So we want to invite you guys to feel free and review some information, get some questions answered, get a soft commitment in, electronic complete the investment packet. We have people that will walk you through the whole process with Syndication Pro. Sponsors review and accept investment package. You wire the funds. And, phase 2 is horizontal construction, which is what we're going to be using this money for, to create more value, because once we take that $2 million to complete the infrastructure, then it'll be worth almost twice as much as that. And that's just going to mean more equity for you as the partners in this deal, because now we have built in forced depreciation into the project. If you want more answers, or if you want to find out more, or even see this review of the deck that we have on our website, or get another copy, or even see the webinar right on our website, go to legacyacquisitions.com/current-deal, or feel free to scan that little QR code in the back. With that, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast, and we really look forward to partnering with you. If you have any questions, reach out to Andy or Derek or myself. We're all available for you, even though we have different roles on the team. So with that, thank you very much.